Right, so I'm going to get you to think in this video about your hips and potentially thinking about how they move and in a very, very different way to what you've thought before. So what are we actually looking at here? Well, if we take a setup to this golf ball, I've got myself an 8-iron here into this 17th hole at Costnavrino. What we do with our hips influences what we do with our upper body. And it's really, really common to see in the backswing someone rotate where the hips move too much in. And then probably more common is to see from the top somebody have what we would class as early extension, where the hips move in towards the golf ball. That tends to raise the upper body, and then we stall out our rotation, we get very, very flippy. So we're going to talk about something that I call pivot points, and understanding that can make a huge difference. So let's do a little demonstration here. I want to use this alignment stick to represent the hips in the golf swing. This would be the golf ball that I'm hitting, and I'm just going to use these two golf balls to just mark where my hips would be. Now it's really common, as we've just said there, to see a golfer shift their hips in towards the golf ball in the golf swing, whether that be backswing or downswing. This is the reason why. Watch what happens if I hold the center of the alignment stick and I use that as the pivot point. So when I rotate this stick, notice what happens. My right hip comes back, my left hip goes forwards. And then if I was to rotate it back towards the start, we rotate back and those hips are back in line with these two golf balls. That's really what we want to have happen. So what would happen if in the backswing we had this right hip as the pivot point? Well, as we start to have rotation, we'd make that movement. And then what would happen on the downswing if we had now the left hip as the pivot point? Well, as we rotate back and we square those hips, they've shifted in towards the golf ball. So we're back to a square position, but we've shifted forward towards the golf ball. That's what's happening in many, many golf swings. We have a poor pivot point on the backswing, a poor pivot point on the downswing, and suddenly we've shifted in towards the golf ball. What's actually going to be more beneficial to you, especially on the downswing, we're going to talk about backswing and downswing, but watch what would happen if I rotated in the backswing, like this, but then actually, if I felt like I held the right hip and pulled my left hip back to match it, we're rotating the hips, but actually we've shifted backwards. We've moved away from the golf ball with our hips. Now, if you look at many of the great players, you know, Tiger, when he was swinging at his best, this is what he would do. He'd have a slight squatting or settling of the body. You'd actually see the hips move this way in transition. That's how they do it. It's the rotation that we've all got, but it's how we rotate. So, as you can see, it's really important that we kind of think about that and we understand that. So what I'd love you to do on the backswing is I really want you to focus very much on turning this right hip behind you. What that's going to do is it's going to mean that if we use this club head as that reference, that's going to mean that as I'm rotating, I'm staying against that sort of imaginary wall that so many coaches talk about. We stop this sort of move inwards here. So as you make your backswing, you're going to get the club head and you're going to move that club head more behind you. And I suddenly feel that moves a little bit more weight into my heel. It actually has the effect of causing my trail leg to lose a little bit of flex, but more importantly, it's keeping me bent over the golf ball in my angles. So let's go ahead and hit a shot. And all I'm going to think about here is just moving that trail hip more behind me, and then we'll give you some downswing ideas. Well, I said left and I've pushed it almost right out the flag. So that's going to help you with your backswing, just really, really simply thinking about moving that right hip behind you. What about the downswing? Well, what I'd love you to do, and this is really, really key, I want you to think about the pivot point as being on the right hip. So if we make our rotation like this, our backswing, we're going to very much feel as if that right hip is what's staying in place. And we're pulling the left hip back to join that trail hip. This is where you and so many golfers will go wrong, because what happens in the backswing is we turn back, the left hip is what becomes the pivot point, and the right is what comes forward to join it. And you can see this sort of movement here. Left is staying, right is coming forward to join it. We've got to flip that around. So as I make my rotation here, it's going to very much feel as if the club head end or my right hip is now staying. And what I'm going to do with my left hip is I'm going to pull my left hip back to join it. Now we see this very, very different move where, yes, I've got rotation. You can see that because the golf club is rotating, but what's happening to the angles in my body, if anything, I'm starting to increase those angles. Now, what do we see? You know, when we look at those great players that you know, strike the ball well and swing the club as we'd like, they have that kind of squatting, that settling movement. This is how they get it. What they're doing is they're almost feeling is that the right hip is holding, the left is coming back to join it. So we have to feel, for you to make better golf swings, left hip is your pivot point in the backswing. Right hip is your pivot point in the downswing. Now when I do that, what I actually feel is I feel like my belt gets pushed back behind my heels. That's another great feeling for you, to get the belt to come back behind my heels. And what you'll notice as I'm doing that is the arms are moving down and they've got all of this space where they can swing through. How many times have you hit a shot and you feel cramped and you feel like your body's stood up and stalled out and you have to flip at it? This is why. If I wanted to practice that, I can absolutely go up to the top. I'm going to feel right hip back, left hip joins. Left hip joins, gets me into here, and then I can turn through. Yeah, much safer shot that one. That's kind of where I wanted to hit it.